The Assembly resumes its sitting. Please be seated. The member from Northside, Leader of the Opposition. Continuing, you have 1 hour and 15 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think when we were interrupted, were interrupted for lunch. I was dealing with the school visits by the members on this side. And I was dealing with I had detailed the positive things that we found. And I was dealing with the negative things that we found. And I don't remember exactly what point I was in, so out of abundance of caution, I will crave your indulgence to repeat them all. On the negative side, all the schools need more human resources, more teachers, assistant teachers, support staff, and specialized staff, especially special needs teachers. 2, all the schools need more space, additional classrooms, special purpose rooms, assembly halls, etc. And one of the special purpose rooms that many of the school needs is a room for which they can take the SEN children and deal with them on a more concentrated and an individual basis in helping them to overcome their learning difficulties, many of which are temporary, and they just need to have proper consultation and encouragement to overcome them. All the schools needed more consumable supplies and teaching aids. 4, the schools needed more and better maintenance on the buildings and on equipment. And on this topic, it was just plain disappointing to see how poorly the buildings were being maintained, the walkways. When you have rain, it's flooded, and kids are there, you can't get to the water cooler. Little things that could be corrected with minor investments. The principals want more autonomy and authority over their schools, staffs, and budget. 6, the schools need more resources to manage their special education needs. They want those needs to be located within the schools, because visiting specialists for a couple of hours, a couple of days a week, just can't cut it with these children. In fact, one of the greatest needs in the classroom is because, unlike the private schools where they can actually turn people away if they're below a certain level, the public school has to deal with the whole spectrum. The special education needs children, the regular children, to the exceptional bright children. And when you go into a classroom and one teacher is having to manage that spectrum of behavior and expectation it's almost impossible without having an assistant teacher or support staff to help them. Because if that teacher has to leave the bright children to spend extra time at one of the tables, even though in the classrooms they could actually separate them, some of them like that, to deal with the special education needs child, the other children are neglected. And the ones in between are neglected as well. And when you go to a school that has 24 classes, 4 classes for each school year, and you have only 1 teaching assistant per year, or 1 teaching assistant for 4 classes. Anyway, in that 5 number, that one person gets sick, the whole, well, 4 classes are in trouble. Teachers and managers within the high schools want to do more technical education within their schools and to start technical education earlier in grade 9. The teachers and managers within the high school want to bring the A-level exam back to the schools. Nobody seems to believe that this 12th grade side effect on some other compound is really working out. The teachers believe that if they had the children for that 12th grade within their own school where they took their first, they can still give the children the second chance to take their exams. And they can go on to do A-levels right within the school. The children is familiar with the school. The teachers are familiar with the children. And, you know, we tend to downplay this, them and us in our society because we Caymanians like to integrate. But I can tell you from personal knowledge that when a student, bright student, almost genius, goes to one of these private schools to do A-levels with these private school students, they're often ridiculed. And some of them even get bullied because you come from the public school system, therefore you must be from a poor Cayman family that don't have nothing. Whereas, you know, we are the children of the elite. And then if the public school child, as often is the case, is smarter than those private school children, then they really get obnoxious because they can't handle that. And we just need, and then the other thing is the economic side of it. When parents has a bright child who wants to do A-levels to go on to university, and the government only provides them with 80% of the cost. For some of these single parents whose children may aspire because of their academic capability to do medicine and things like that, for them to find $5,000 or $6,000 per term, because the school is only, the government scholarship, by sending them there, is only paying 80% of it, is difficult. And we shouldn't be exposing our children to those kind of things when we can do it cheaper and better by keeping them in the same school. And the most disturbing thing of all, though, in some of the schools was the condition of the play area for kindergarten children. I mean, we have, in some of these schools, you have kindergarten children playing on crushed rock and swings and seats above crushed rock. Man, I mean, the government can buy FIFA-rated artificial turf out of China by the 40-foot container for about 10, 15 cents a square yard. But we expect to somehow grow grass or bush for these kindergarten children. And then when they fall down and get injured, they have no medical assistance. I mean, the place like Aiden Oil Primary School, the clinic is right there, across the fence. But the teacher can't take the children there for the nurse to treat. They got to call an ambulance to take them somewhere. And some of the schools don't have any nursing care. And others have one nurse for 1,000 students. And if you look at some of the special education needs ratios, you got a school with almost 900 children, and they have 4 SEN specialized teachers. And the average number of SEN children in the schools is around 25%. But we collect $700 and odd million, and we're going to spend 300 plus on a cruise port that we don't need because, now wait a minute, fold it down. I don't normally rely on the Cayman Compass for information. But, you know, in this environment, as my grandmother used to say, you gotta use what you got, right? To bolster your argument. And on the Compass on Wednesday, August the 30th, 2017, my apologies. This is the Cayman Reporter. My apologies. That's a big mistake. It's a big mistake. But my apologies to the Compass. Sincerest and deepest apologies. There's an article that says,
To read from that, honorable member. If you do, I would like a copy of it before you read it. Should I say to the honorable members that anyone intending to use a document of any kind, papers of any kind, you should, as is the procedure, give the chair a copy of what you intend to read from or quote from. Thank you.
I guess we can do them individually.
Would the member from the outside resume his debate?
On page 9 of the Cayman Reporter published Wednesday, August 30th, 2017, there's an article entitled Cayman is number 2 for cruisers. And this is based on a survey by Cruiser's Choice Destination Awards, and it says that Cayman, without a cruise berth, is number 2 destination in the Western itinerary. So I think that suggests that we are not desperate and we should not be clamoring to spend $300+ million on a pier when we rated number 2. And we can put some money into these education facilities that is so badly needed. Sadly, the figures in the plan and estimates do not provide the resources to satisfy any of the schools' needs when secondary education both is reduced and primary education is only marginally increased. Unfortunately, $1 million reduction in the maintenance vote is unlikely to deliver the increase in maintenance that is needed at all the schools. Simply put, education is in need of some serious increases in funding, both for the facilities, both for the staff, the teachers, the assistant teachers, the specialized teachers, and just as equally, funds to provide adequate resources and teaching aids. All of our children seem to be learning in black and white. Because, and you know, I'm not speaking here from what somebody tells me. I'm one of the few members in Parliament whose child goes to a public school. And because we no longer provide textbooks, which usually have a little bit of color in them, and we're now relying on the teacher to photocopy from one book all of the homework assignments, all of the classwork, and then the photocopiers, because they haven't been replaced so long, are constantly breaking down. And if you happen to cross from one academy to the next academy, that academy don't allow the teacher from the other academy to use their photocopiers. Time to sink the dock and float education so all children can benefit from the rising tide. Thankfully, the budget does contain $9.6 million, which the opposition supports, but we believe is not enough to cover all of the following areas. 1, special education. 2, the enhancement of science, the enhancement of literacy, the enhancement of math, as well as skills up to upgrading of 400 teachers and assistants, plus scholarships and youth programs and additional teachers. Now, as my good friend, the elected representative from Savannah, always like to tell us about that man that was on Riviera Beach. We know that he also worked miracle with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. But I believe the Minister of Education is going to have to not only solicit his divine intervention, but I think she's going to have to borrow some tricks from Houdini. Because she had to give some of this money to some of these people and take it back quick before they spend it so she can give it to somebody else. If we can cover all them things. And you got to make sure that no chains and no padlocks are around. That's an awful lot. But it tells you that the government itself understands that there are needs in the schools that need to be addressed. But they have chosen to build a $300+ million pier over completing the physical plant for the schools.
Honorable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, the member is misleading the House by continuing to say it's a $300 million dock. That number has never been put any place in the business studies that I am aware of.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, do you have any documentation that says that this is a $300 million dock?
We have no documentation, period, on the docks. We have asked, but it's common knowledge out there, and if the minister will cares to elaborate, I'll be quite willing to sit down for him to tell me exactly how much the cruise pier is going to cost.
Honorable Minister, you wish to do that now, or you wish to do that in your substantive debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll respond to the member when I debate.
Honorable Member, if you do not have documentation that says this is a $300 million dock, I'd prefer you not to use that sum for the records. Will the member continue his debate?
It will be very interesting to hear what the cruise pier is going to cost. And if I am wrong, I accept that I don't have the written proof of the 300 million. But I believe a couple of us was around when the minister himself indicated, but I won't hold him to that. I'll leave it until he gets up. He'll have 2 hours. He can explain it. I know this much, and I want them to correct this. I know this much. The dock is going to cost more than a primary school. And it is going to cost more than the completion of the John Gray High School. Forget the figures. So, as my grandfather said in church one time, when he made the mistake of saying that Jonah had swallowed the whale, and Grandma Jewel tell him, no, Jackie, it was the whale that swallowed Jonah. The important thing here, the dock can cost more than schools. If it's not, then...
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable Premier.
I have sat by patiently. The member is deliberately now misleading the House. There is only $3 million provided for the project costs, the development costs, planning, design costs of the cruise port in the current budget. That's all. So this constant comparison of $300 million and you're not building the school, there is not the money for the construction of the cargo port in the current budget. And we have made it plain it is not going to be financed by government anyhow.
Thank you. Honorable Member, for some time you have been elaborating on this $300 million, not just since we started back after lunch, but before that. I think you should move on.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked. We're we're going to bid on the docks, and we're letting out certain stuff in November this year about procurement for the docks, and we only putting money in the 2018 and the 2019 budget to do the design. Except that I'm wrong. No. That's what. Oh, yeah. It is going to be interesting exercise in Finance Committee to drill down and determine just how this 9.6 million is being divided and how much is going into administration and shared services to the individual schools. Because part of the huge problem in the schools is that for years, they barely get enough to get by. And often, they get enough to get in trouble. And I can tell you that we are doing, from personal experience, that we are doing a disservice to SEN children when they got to wait 6 weeks and 2 months to get an assessment. Some parents can afford to go and get the private assessments in the meantime, and they can afford to send their children for private lessons. The majority of Caymanians don't have that luxury. Time to sink the dock and float education so all children can benefit from the rising tide. The Premier also says in his policy statement that 36 million is being invested in education over 2 years. But again, it's a huge smorgasbord of things, any one of which, if done properly, could consume the whole money. Here's what's expected to cover. Computer software and equipment. Most of the schools, computers and equipment are 4 and 5 years old. I am sure members in this House are fully aware of how quickly computers get out of date. Many of the smart boards are 5 and 6 years old. Many are not working. Needed improvements at Bordentown Primary School. That alone, if they address the needs of the school, including the hall, the assembly hall, that they've had drawings for several years, is going to consume 25-30% of that figure. Not to mention the kindergarten children playing on rocks as big as my fist, with no lawn, no nothing, no cover over their play area, and the few places that they don't have rocks, they put sand. With all the wild cats we got in this country, 3 and 4 year olds sometimes find it difficult to tell the difference between hard cat excrement and a piece of steak. But that's okay. We're going to build a dog. Savannah Primary School. Again, the needs of that one school can consume 30 to 40% of that figure. Reed B Primary School, same thing. You don't have to take my word for it. Take the time to do what the members on this side did. Go and visit the schools and look around. Blind Bartimaeus can see the problems if you don't step down in the corridor of water first. As well as UCCI. The amount is also expected to start the initial planning for a new West Bay Primary School, as well as the completion of the John Gray High School. I can make a big assumption here. I'm assuming that what you're talking about completing is the plans for John Gray High School. Because I can't imagine what you could build after you take all the other things out of the 36 million and call it a high school. Understand? The members on this side support this. Although, I must tell the Minister of Education that the member for East End and myself are a little bit concerned that the needs of East End Primary and Aidan Mile Primary School are excluded from that 36 million over the 2-year period. Because remember now, we're not going to be back here next year bargaining for money. This is 2 years. The opposition, members on this side, contends that for these schools to get the proper attention in this 2-year budget cycle, that amount of money needs to be closer to $100 million. And we have a $141 million surplus over that 2-year period. Time to sink the dock and float education so all children can benefit from the rising tide. At least give us the $3 million that's in the budget for the port and take the balance from the $141 million surplus. Oops. Apologies again. Forgot that surplus, the DAPE, don't exist. But in case we do find it, which we hope we will, in Finance Committee, let's put some of the $141 million surplus in education for our children. Let's be bold. Let's be brave. Let's take action. Let's no longer empathize with these suffering children and suffering parents. Let's put the money there and fix the place properly for them. You know, it would be interesting, but we'll probably never know. What was the actual submission for this budget from the Education Ministry, and what would be their true needs for education if they could get that kind of investment in education? It's very interesting. There's an old adage. If you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Time to sink the dock and float education so all children can benefit from the rising tide. Healthcare is a mess. In January 2017, the Office of the Auditor General did 2 very comprehensive reports on healthcare in the Cayman Islands. one on the Cayman Islands health system, which for the first time actually documented what was out there in our countries and the health system, and reference it to some international standards, which gave us a good view of what it was like. The second one, ensuring quality health care and a healthy population. I would have hoped that these reports, and I know they could, and they should have, served the government well in preparing this budget. But listening to the speeches and reviewing the plan and estimates seems quite clearly both reports were ignored. The report ensuring quality health care and a healthy population was particularly critical of the system and pointed to many inadequacies, some of which should be addressed and arrested in this budget cycle. Instead, what we have in this budget is the same old inadequate incremental increases with none of the boldness that is needed to transform healthcare in the Cayman Islands. The executive summary of the report issuing quality health care and a healthy population. Mr. Sergeant, could you photocopy this for the speaker for me, please? Or you have an extra copy in there? Yeah? I got a quote from it. Anyway. The executive summary of this report states, and I quote from the executive summary on page 1. More generally, the audit found that government's ability to execute its health-related roles and responsibilities is impaired by weaknesses in two-way communication with its private sector partners and by shortages in capacity. There are resourcing shortages at the ministry level, where they were identified as one of the major factors leading to delays in implementing the NHPP. Within the Department of Health Regulatory Services, where the enforcement of compliance with the health insurance law and regulations has suffered despite innovative initiatives that sought to compensate for shortages of staff and within the Health Services Authority. These managerial incompetencies and inadequacies at the ministerial level and the Health Services Authority need to be addressed, funded, and eliminated in this budget cycle. The recent changes in the Medical and Dental Council to remove the Caymanian doctor who was determined to maintain and raise standards might not have been a wise move. Now that he is not bridled by the constraints and responsibilities of being chairman of the council, he may be more difficult to handle as he possesses the fortitude to not go quietly into the night. It is particularly disturbing to me as a former healthcare professional who spent the better part of my early life establishing standards for healthcare in this country. To believe that it is a possibility that being good for business is more important than requiring an English test from a heart surgeon, although we require English tests under the immigration law from janitors and gardeners. The Premier should not take too much credit to raise his expectations that putting the Financial Secretary or his designate and the Chief Officer of the Ministry of Health on the board will have any effect on the finances of the Health Services Authority. Given the results of the most recent audited accounts, which would have to have been accepted by the board before they were referred to the Auditor General. These accounts would have been most likely approved after they were appointed. And the Auditor General had to make some $53 million in corrections to the accounts that the board accepted before they could be audited on a $102 million operation. In fact, if we include the adjustment for reevaluation of assets, the corrections were $100+ million. I welcome, not only as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, but just as an ordinary citizen, the HSA's declaration that they will get a clean audit opinion in 2018. But by the way, Mr. Premier, Deloitte was not hired, as you have been informed, to advise on how to successfully progress the accounts to that point. Deloitte was specifically hired to identify the problems that existed, or that and does exist, most of which had already been identified by the Auditor General, and another company is going to be hired to implement the recommendations and solve the problems that Deloitte identified. And for some strange reason, they took the decision that Deloitte would not be, or whoever won the first bid to identify the problems or confirm the problems as identified by the Auditor General's office was prohibited from bidding on the implementation. And these are not cheap consultants, you know. Oh, that's why I'm offering to correct it for you, Mr. Premier. Because like I said, you were told. Yeah. Yeah. The budget documents, nor the three speeches, mention any of the recommendations made by the Auditor General in the report, all of which were endorsed and supported by the Public Accounts Committee, and we anxiously await the government minute in response to those recommendations, which, by the way, is past due by a couple of months. The opposition, the members on this side, welcome the government's plan to review the role of Cineco. And given the information contained in the annual report from the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority tabled this morning, it may be time to go to a single-payer system. Yeah, there should be a report. This was tabled this morning, so there should be an extra copy of that around. The report is entitled Cayman Islands Monetary Authority Annual Report 2016. Okay. I want to refer to page 30, table 10. Domestic insurance company statistics, by primary class of business as of the 31st of December 2015. And this table deals with domestic insurance. It deals with property, motor, health, liability, marine and aviation, other, life, and a grand total. I just want to deal with the health column. You got this morning when this was tabled this morning? You got it in the mail. Following the rules. I'm just interested, for the sake of this presentation, we'll get to the other columns, which I believe the government need to pay attention to, property and motor and all that. But let's just look at the health column. Direct premiums in healthcare was $245,349,000. I'm not sure whether this would include Cineco figures or not. But even if it does, what we want to get to is the bottom line. Assumed premiums, $675,000. Ceded premiums, $30,195,000. Unearned premium adjustment, $4,000. Total underwriting income for health insurance in the Cayman Islands as of the 31st of December 2015 was $215,825,000. $215,825,000. Expenses paid, which I would assume is a fancy word for claims. $149,911,000. Unlike the government, they don't talk about operational profit, surplus. Changes, IBNR, 9,000. Incurred loss subtotal, $142,563,000, which again I would think would be to do with premiums. Acquisitions and general expenses, $21,743,000. Total underwriting expenses, $164,306,000. Total underwriting income, which could be profit, because you took all the expenses out, $51,519,000. $519,000. End of reference to this document. Now, this indicates that the health insurance providers, in spite of their weeping and wailing, are not losing money. And premiums collected are not a small amount. We are concerned that many of the line items in the Ministry of Health are unrealistic, given the expenses incurred in this financial period, and they appear to be adjusted to produce a surplus rather than reflect the true costs that should be budgeted. As an example, medical care for indigents is increased by a whopping $2 over the annualized amount for 2017 and 2019, and has no increase in 2019 over 2018. Given the lack of opportunities for elderly Caymanians to get employed, including the provisions in this budget cycle, it is a pretty safe bet that the number of Caymanians certified as to get indigent health care will likely increase during the 2 years of this budget cycle. Unless we're going to introduce some formula, as one former member told him in the Bahamas when they asked him about the population thing. Yeah, he said we got 1 for 1, 1 dead, 1 born. Unless we can take one off every time we put one off, you can't keep it constant. The opposition, the people on this side, supports a review of the National Conservation Law. And we are particularly concerned that the National Conservation Law Board and/or the Director of the Environment seems to believe they have a choice in implementing certain sections of the National Conservation Law. And in particular, the section in the National Conservation Law that deals with the licensing of spear guns. The board and the Director of Environment seems to believe that they can barter the implementation and enforcement of certain sections of this law, and that they will only implement certain sections if the Legislative Assembly and the Cabinet heed to their request to drastically expand the marine parks. Most places in the world, that's called blackmail. I would request of the Deputy Governor that he instructs the civil servants who are so bold to publicly state that they can buy this assembly and cabinet or blackmail us into granting their requests. But they are duty bound to implement and enforce all laws passed in this honorable legislative assembly and assented to by the governor. I got enjoyed that kind of last long. I don't know, and I've been around this legislative assembly for a little while. I know of no provisions in the Constitution, no provisions in the Public Service Management Law, or any other law that allows a civil servant or a board established under law to selectively enforce sections of the law. They are paid civil servants, and the board is, well, maybe paid much, but they are also paid to enforce the law and not to take imaginary positions that it is somehow unlawful against the environment to put a farm road on farmland. On August the 24th of this year, I wrote the Honorable Minister for the Environment, challenging a decision made by enforcement officers of the DOE on a matter in my constituency. Yeah. Copy that for everybody. No, man. I'm talking about Gina. I'm talking about Gina. Both. And your chief officer too. Stop having, they need to stop having lunch together and planning these things. I don't believe in the minister. The minister can only ask him to do something about it, and I know he asked him. This letter is dated August the 24th, 2017, and it was delivered by hand to the Honorable Minister. Says, Dear Honorable Minister, removal of iron shore on Block 33B, Parcel 266. The developer of Rum Point Club has removed a substantial amount of iron shore from the above reference parcel 33B266. The removal of this iron shore was reported to the Department of the Environment, DOE in brackets, because the removal of the iron shore included sections in the water, causing a large amount of marl to be washed into the sea in the replenishment zone of the marine parks in which the work took place. The DOE, according to an article in the Cayman Compass, copy attached, on Monday, August the 21st, 2017, on page 5, sent an inspector to the site on Tuesday, August the 15th, 2017, who determined that the work was taking place above the high water mark and therefore not a matter for the DOE, but for the planning department. The inspector from the DOE then reported the matter to the planning department, who visited the site and determined that the developer was working outside the remit approved by the central planning department and therefore issued a stop notice. I wish to take issue with the inspector from the DOE determination that the work was taking place above the high water mark and not affecting the marine park, as I have photographic evidence that suggests otherwise. I have attached 3 photos. Photo 1, taken on July the 13th, 2014, shows the shoreline of 33B266 and the extent of the iron shore and no rocks. Photo 2, taken on May the 30th, 2015, again shows the extent of the iron shore and no rocks, but it also shows the sludge from the developer's excavation of 32B266 running into the marine park and polluting the sea. This act by the developer was also reported at the time to the DOE, and to my knowledge, no action was taken to prosecute the developer. Photo 3, taken Thursday, August the 17th, clearly shows the massive amounts of iron shore destroyed by the developer and the discoloration of the near shore seawater of the marine park, while the rest of the marine park is crystal clear, demonstrating that work and iron shore removal took place below the high water mark and therefore should have been the subject of a coastal works permit. The removal and destruction of this iron shore without the appropriate coastal works license and said iron shore being a natural storm barrier should, in my view, be a violation under the National Conservation Law and in particular in the Marine Park regulations. The DOE inspectors, and rightly so, are quick to attest, detain, and charge members of my constituency who take conch or lobster out of season or exceed the limits in season and therefore violate the marine parks regulations under the National Conservation Law. These violators are quickly taken to court and often convicted by the courts and heavy fines handed down, and the courts may even confiscate the boat, motor, trailer, and other equipment used to catch the conch or lobster. How then can DOE turn a blind eye on this developer's deliberate, willful, irreparable, and permanent destruction of coastal iron shore and the marine habitat for species of marine life that balance the ecosystem in the marine park and especially in a replenishment zone? I am requesting that you, as minister responsible, review the photographic evidence and seek a determination as to why the DOE did not arrest, charge, and prosecute this developer for damaging a marine park by the removal of coastal iron shore and killing the marine life attached to this iron shore. I would also seek to how the inspector determined that the work was being done above the high water mark when photo 3 suggests otherwise. I ask for your urgent attention on this matter as it is my experience with this developer on this project, that he, having been caught doing something without CPA permission, will simply apply to the CPA for approval after the fact, and the CPA will grant him permission, and the developer will gladly pay the increased fee and continue the project. I, by copy of this letter and photos to the Director of Planning, inform the CPA of evidence that the coastal work should have had a coastal works license. I look forward to your urgent action in this matter. Sincerely, D. Ezra Miller, MA for the District of Northside. And if members cast their eye on photo number 1, there's a coconut tree at the edge of the greenery, and you can see all of the iron shore, and you can see the sludge running out. Photo 2, same coconut tree, but it identifies the large quantity of iron shore. Photo 3, same coconut tree, no iron shore. And you can see from the color of the water, and all of us who live by the coast know that if that was natural mud, it would go all the way to the reef. Because there are times when the weather itself stirs up silt, but it goes all the way out to the reef. This is 2 months. To my knowledge, DOE, nor the planning, has done nothing about this letter. We need action, not empathy. There is no justification to drastically expand the marine parks when the DOE continues to demonstrate that they're incapable of properly enforcing the law in the current marine parks. We need to make sure that the law is enforced fairly and equitably on all residents, citizens, visitors of this country. We are going down a path in this country where the less fortunate Caymanians are beginning to believe that they are being deliberately victimized and deprived because they don't have the money to hire fancy lawyers. And if we don't stop it, the community is not going to respect the DOE enforcement officers who selectively enforce the law. Do we really believe that the people in my constituency who fishing for a living and go and get 3 or 4 conchs to fishing with can accept that they will be arrested and punished, put in jail, but a developer can come in and do anything he wants? And this particular, well, I can deal with it when I get to my constituents tomorrow, because I got quite a bit to go. Time. We support the government's plan to hire 75 new police officers over the next 3 years. And we also believe that increasing community police is a wise way to deploy these resources. However, we would strongly recommend that the government consider sending these new police recruits overseas, preferably to the UK, for at least a year to receive proper training. We do not subscribe to the idea that we can properly train a police officer in 3 months at Governor Square. We also recommend that all avenues be exhausted to ensure that these 75 new policemen are Caymanian. Now, I heard in the news this morning that some smart ass landowner believes he can block off a beach access because he determines it is being used for the wrong purposes. Somebody needs to. You stop interrupting me. I've been finished a long time. Somebody from the police service needs to tell this landowner that we have a police service that is supposed to enforce the law. But, of course, again, we know it depends on who you are and what the CPA, and I want to make it clear that I know this is not elected representatives doing this stuff, right? We find the CPA granting constructions of tunnels across prescriptive right-of-ways to 7 Mile Beach. The one that they already granted, blocks 2. If they grant the extension, they got block 3. And I know that they have prescriptive thing because I was involved with the concerned citizens group in the 80s when we put up the swim signs. How is it possible, Mr. Attorney General, that one arm of government can ignore another law? We just passed the public lands law that says there are specific provisions in the public lands law to prevent the blockage of these beach access ways. The same developer that dug up the iron shore, the CPA approved a fence, 7-foot chain link fence, across a fire access to the next door condos on which there is an easement registered, and in so doing, also fenced off the prescribed beach access that's on his property.
Remember, you have 10 minutes left.
I complained. I took government representatives there, showed them. Planning department tell me that, oh, don't worry about it because the developers say if the fire truck come, you just drive over the fence. Fire department tell me they don't have a problem with it because you promised not to put a padlock on it. Now, what is the purpose of erecting a 7-foot fence? To protect your construction material if you're not going to padlock it. But you can go to know the fence is up now. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to improve the safety of the Water Key, Rum Point, Sand Point junction. Man come in, build a concrete wall. Destroyed all of that money government invested. We've had at least 2 accidents there already because you blocked the view. The fill that he piled up in order to raise the height of the fence above 4 feet is 18 inches on to the pre-mixed hot mix asphalt. And I carried the people there, and they said, they don't think it's in the road. You can go there now. Where is the enforcement arm of government? In the meantime, now, people in my constituency who are getting old like me want to build a little Texas 111 house. Is told they can't use J-bolts, 8-inch J-bolts with a 2-inch washer and a 5-year nuts anymore to bolt the 2x4 onto the concrete slab. They got use some expensive Simpson tie, which is going to last maximum 5 years, north side, not Salt Spray, and got rust away. And they turned down the plan. But this man builds a fence on a 10-year-old plan, you know. Can't do nothing about it. This rum point thing has to be sorted out. The other thing we have is that we are allowing individuals to destroy the family atmosphere at Rum Point, where people have always taken their families in boats on Sundays afternoons and Saturday afternoons, with noise, pornography being distributed, being displayed, drugs. As I'm telling you, I'm anchored there with my family. The boat come and drop anchor on top of my anchor and take out and light up a split bigger than the cigar I ever smoked in my life. Police boat within sight of me, you know. I tell my dear wife and family, we need to leave because otherwise I can test positive for ganja tomorrow. I can't afford that, being a representative on our side. Got part of boats. To the best of my knowledge, those licenses that those part of boats have say they can't play music within a quarter mile of shore. Up there, they're in the 200-foot zone. And it's not good sounding music? Huh? Oh, no. I need to request of the minister responsible for the Water Authority for the road. The road has finally been built where it's gazetted to go. So the water pump couldn't put it in before because although the road was gazetted, the government had made a decision in the 90s to relocate the road. So I didn't pressure them to put in water, but we have quite a few people that live at the end of that road now that need water. So I'm hoping that in the next budget they can put the water in there. We have a serious problem with subdivision roads, not just in my constituency, but all over the island. When people apply to planning for subdivisions, they have to provide 30-foot roads, and they have to provide 30-foot road to connect to arterial roadways or other established roadways. Every developer I talk to is quite happy to have the government gazette those roads. I can't understand why we can't take the survey that is submitted for the housing scheme, housing the lots, and just gazette it based on that plan. Because what's happening now, right on the seam for the road, I know that, but the government don't know that. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to get in no argument with you. I established protocol at the beginning of my speech this morning. I established protocol at the start of my speech after lunch. There is no requirement in standing orders to say, Mr. Speaker, once the protocol is established. Most of us use that word to think.
Maybe. But
it can't be no maybe, Mr. Chairman, now.
Honorable member, please sit down. Thank you. You know that you're not addressing members as such. You know what the rule is. And you're refusing to do so. I've written to you, made a note to you to say, kindly acknowledge the chair. Whether you like the person in this chair is the chair. And you might have said, Mr. Speaker, once and twice, and it's obvious it's deliberate. But you're saying that you're not setting any standards. The protocols are the chair is recognized. At least you're not talking to the gallery. You're not supposed to. And you're not talking to members. You are talking to the chair. That's all I expect. Thank you. You can continue your speech. Is the member from the outside continuing his speech? In that case, we'll take the afternoon break, 15 minutes.